Hey everyone, Devin here. If you're new to the group, I am the admin. I am a yoga teacher and a mama and a wife. I have a 4-year-old and a 13-month-old, and they're the sweetest. My 4-year-old just started school today, so that was a whole new world for us. And today's subject is all about the pelvic floor. I love talking about the pelvic floor because there is so much misconceptions and lack of knowledge for something that we should all know so much about. So before we get started, if anything I say really resonates with you or anything like that, put a little comment in, maybe your favorite emoji, maybe like one of those emojis, or you can comment about it, or if you're too shy to comment about it, feel free to DM me. Same thing, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. This is a really important subject, so I want to make sure you guys know what the heck I'm talking about. Yeah, so let's get into it because there is a lot to discuss and I probably won't even get to all of it. So I might do a workshop at the end of the month on this because I know it's something you all want to know more about and I want to talk about. So did you know that there is a statistic for us women that 1 in 3 will experience bladder leakage or incontinence, and they make that out like that is, it's just something to accept, and 1 in 3, normalize it. And I'm not saying that you need to be hush-hush about it if you are experiencing that or anything like that. Of course not. It's always better when we share our experiences. But what I don't like about that statistic is that it's basically saying this is something that's going to happen to a huge portion of the population and you're just going to have to accept it. And as a woman, don't we have to accept all sorts of things that we shouldn't have to anyways? And so why should we accept that when what we really need is more education and more knowledge about this area of our bodies so that we don't have to be that statistic, or we can lessen it. So maybe in a few short years, it can become 1 in 4, or maybe 1 in 6, or 1 in 10, eventually making it a smaller and smaller statistic. And like, it always makes me so sad when people are like, oh yeah, I've had a baby, or I've had 2 babies, so, I can't sneeze anymore, or, oh, don't make me laugh too hard, I'm going to pee, or I can't go on a trampoline anymore, I've had children. And I'm like, no, this isn't something that's like, oh, like this is just what, once you become a mother, you have to accept that. Like, no, there are things you can do. And I think it's just also sad because like the depth of the average person's knowledge in regards to the pelvic floor is like Kegels, and knowing that from like a sitcom, those ones like I like a one that pops into my head just off the top of my head is Arrested Development. Lindsay Bluth was like just sitting on the couch and like one of the other characters was like, oh, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm getting my exercise in. And it was Kegels because like, it was funny that she was sitting on the couch and like seemingly doing nothing, but she was doing her exercises. And like, it's not taught about anywhere. So you're like, oh, like Oh yeah, I learned that from a show. Like that's so sad. This is like an area of our body that is so important and nobody talks about it and you don't learn about it properly from anybody on average. So, I'm here to help you with that. I'm here to teach you a bit. So, you don't have to be one of those people who learned about your pelvic floor from Arrested Development or a show like it. Oh my God. So yeah, the pelvic floor. It is an area of your body that is kind of like a hammock and it keeps everything in. And it's really important. And it's almost like we don't know about it because people think it's taboo or it's one of those things that people are like when they talk about it. And it shouldn't be. Like, how is it any different than like any other part of the human anatomy? It's not. It's part of the anatomy, so you need to know about it. And I'm not saying you need to be like, you need to know every single thing about your human anatomy. I mean, like, I know the basics. I don't know it all. I'm not like a physician, you know what I mean? But I know about the pelvic floor in a way that many people don't. And I learned it not from TV shows and not from Googling. I have taken multiple trainings and workshops on the subject. So I do know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so the first time I went to a pelvic floor workshop, I didn't know it was that per se. It was like I can't even remember what attracted me to the workshop, but I went to it and we were doing these exercises and the teacher was like, oh yeah, so you should feel this or this in your pelvic floor. And I went with a friend and afterwards she was like, is there something wrong with me? I couldn't feel what she was talking about. So first of all, it is a very subtle area. You're not gonna really feel it unless you're doing those like clenched Kegels that you learned about from the sitcom shows. And that's not what we should be doing, spoiler alert, if you can believe it. And I was like, no, you're not weird. I didn't feel it either. I thought I was weird because there's so many things in my body that I haven't felt because I feel like before yoga, I was really not very connected to my body. For example, in like an exercise class where they're like, oh, engage your lats. I was like, I know where they are, but I don't know how to feel them. And I literally didn't figure out what I was feeling when I was doing lat stuff until like maybe a year and a half ago, for context. So when the teacher was saying, oh, you should feel this and this, and I didn't feel it, I wasn't surprised because there's many instances where teachers will say, oh, feel this or engage that, and I don't know how. So I thought it was just me, but my friend also did not feel it. So it is a subtle area, and until you really connect your mind to body, especially that area, you might not feel a whole lot. So a really important thing is to try to start feeling the connection there. When you are doing a pelvic floor exercise, to really, really like focus on that area, like visualize it, and then see if you can start eventually feeling things. You might not at first though. So you are normal if you don't feel it at first. And yeah, so the truth about Kegels is that what we are taught from those shows and stuff like that is that Kegel is to clench and release, almost like you're trying to stop a flow of pee. And we're made to think that's all we have to do, and that's going to save us, and that's the end of the story. And people who've done that have become part of that statistic I talked about earlier. So why is that? Because clenching and releasing actually makes that area tight, not strong, and not using the full range of motion. So what happens when that area is tight, like anywhere else in our human anatomy, it's not good per se to be tight. It can be painful as well and cause issues. In the pelvic floor's example, if you are tight, it causes issues like bladder leakage and incontinence. The real story with the pelvic floor is that you want to be working on the full range of motion. So meaning strength and mobility, flexibility, sort of thing. So what the heck does that mean, and how do you deal with it? So first of all, I feel like we get in our minds like, oh my God, I have to work on the pelvic floor because I don't want to be one of those statistics. But then you don't even know how to. So let me tell you that the pelvic floor is working, it's engaging and releasing throughout the whole day. And like I said, it's a subtle part of your body, so you don't necessarily feel it doing that all day. You might just think it's totally offline and not doing anything. So a really good way to start working on that mind-body connection is in your pelvic tilts. So you might practice that standing up or however you want. I would highly, highly suggest doing it in your cat-cow poses. This is as a teacher who has taught many, many people over the years, cat-cow pose is the easiest way for people to really connect to their pelvic tilt. So when you are doing your cow pose, that is if this is the floor and you're in your table pose, that's your back going like this. In your cow pose, instead of focusing on your back bending like that, you're going to focus on your pelvic tilt and you're going to visualize your tailbone. You're going to think of your tailbone facing up towards the sky. As you're doing that, your pelvic floor is naturally blossoming open. And then in your cat pose, which is when you start to arch your back like a scared cat, you instead of thinking of your back being like a scared cat, you're going to think of your pelvis tilting the other way and your tailbone coming down towards the floor. And that is a natural engagement of your pelvic floor. So it engages naturally when your pelvis is tilted that way. And when your pelvis is tilted like the cow pose, it naturally opens. So throughout the day, you're sitting down right now, your pelvis might be tilted a little bit, almost like, depending on how much you're rounding your back, it might be tilted like cow pose. You might be blossoming open a little bit. If you are really hunching, you might be engaging your pelvic floor a little bit. And that happens throughout the day, both engaging and blossoming open. And like I said, it's subtle, so you might not feel that throughout the day. And you might not, you're not going to be thinking your entire day like, oh, like what's my pelvic floor doing right now? But I can assure you that's what it is doing in a normally functioning pelvic floor. So there's extreme cases, of course, but we're talking about the general population's normally functioning pelvic floor. So when you are doing the pelvic tilts, you might find particularly that it's hard to tilt your pelvis, tailbone up towards the sky, because we're so used to engaging, especially if you really do those typical Kegels. And you might notice in stuff like forward folds that you tend to round your back to try to touch the floor instead of tilt your pelvis. So it's a really good thing to start practicing, because you want to do that in stuff like forward folds to get more length in your hamstrings, etc. But knowing that feeling in your cat pose is really helpful in your core exercises, because the pelvic floor is attached to what your core is doing. So for example, if you're doing a lying down core exercise, like let's say leg drops as your example, your legs are straight up in the air, and as they come down, you might notice that your back pops off of the floor, that your core isn't quite strong enough to keep your back glued to the floor. If you think about that spatially, you're trying to be like cat pose, but on your back. So you're really pushing your back into the floor, and doing that is engaging your core. It's also engaging your pelvic floor. And it's a good one to do postpartum when you're cleared to do it, and to really, really push that back into the floor so that you are building back those muscles and the pelvic floor. And sometimes the ego gets in the way. You're like, oh, pre-pregnancy, I could get my heels to touch down to the floor, so I'm going to do that even though my back's popping off the floor. So don't do that, because then you're in this situation where you're trying to work on the muscles of your abdomen, but your pelvis is tilting like cow pose. So your pelvic floor is blossoming open while you're putting so much pressure on your abs. So you're pushing everything down into a blossoming open pelvic floor. So as you can probably imagine, that can contribute to that statistic we talked about earlier. You're opening up the pelvic floor, and then you're trying to shove everything down. Like, of course, that's going to create problems and could lead to what we talked about before, the bladder leakage, the incontinence, and we don't want that. So definitely don't bring your legs all the way down if you can't keep your back glued down the whole time. And that's just a quick example, but that's what you want to be engaging in all of your core work. So as you can imagine, if you're in any other core position and your pelvis is tilting in the way like cow pose, so you're blossoming open, but you're trying to work on your core. This happens in plank. Oftentimes people's butts are in the air because it feels easier, but it's not good, because again, especially as a postpartum woman, especially if you're trying to get into this like 6 weeks after giving birth, if your pelvic floor is blossoming open and you're putting so much pressure on your core, which pushes everything down, it's not going to be good times. So you gotta be gentle on yourself as you heal your core and your pelvic floor. So how do you, should Kegels be like a thing of the past? No, not necessarily. What you want to do if you are going to work on Kegels is like the elevator method. So luckily that's been gaining more popularity in the last little while. So you might have heard of that. Instead of clenching like you're trying to stop pee, you're going to think of like your pelvic floor like an elevator. You're engaging it and trying to bring it up. And that can feel really hard. So it might be something to really work on if you find that to be very difficult. You are thinking of almost like, call it like 3 floors. So your breath is like taking the pelvic floor up, but that's not where you stop. You're not like, okay, I'm done. Then you think of the pelvic floor coming back down and maybe into the basement. So you're not thinking of like pushing, like you're trying to push pee out. You're thinking of like that blossoming open action. You're thinking of on the engagement, elevator coming up, and then on the blossoming open, you're thinking of your elevator coming down. And that's what you want to work on if you are choosing to work on Kegels, or if you've been told your pelvic floor isn't functioning as well as it should be. You need to do some pelvic floor exercises, but you can do that, but I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting really good at your pelvic tilts. That is a pelvic floor exercise, and it is something that is definitely helpful when you're trying to heal that area. So let's review. There is the statistic that 1 in 3 women will experience incontinence and bladder leakage, maybe other stuff. And we're supposed to take that as just something that's going to happen, and that's just life. But it's not necessarily. Oftentimes this happens because the pelvic floor is too tight, and that can be because you've been doing the squeeze Kegels. And that's totally reasonable because nobody teaches about this stuff and you don't know. So hopefully after listening to this, now you know what you want to do is work on your pelvic floor, your pelvic tilts to work on your pelvic floor, trying it in cat-cow poses. When you're in cow pose, you're tilting your pelvis so that your tailbone is facing up towards the sky. That's blossoming open your pelvic floor. In your cat pose, you're tilting your pelvis in a way such that your tailbone's pointing down towards the floor, and that is a natural engagement of the pelvic floor. So doing all that, trying to connect your mind to that area, because it's a subtle feeling that you're not necessarily going to feel right away. And getting really good at those tilts is going to be a really big part of healing your pelvic floor. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions at all, first of all, don't feel embarrassed or shy, because like I said, this subject, there's hardly any information. So if you have a question, you can be almost sure that someone else has the same question. But if you do feel shy about it, please DM me if you don't want to put it in the comments, because I will help you. I want to help you with this. I don't want you to be like, I have a question about that, but I'm too shy to ask, so I'm just going to deal with it. Don't just deal with it. If you don't know, ask. And I would love to help you feel better. I hope this video helps you feel better if you are trying to be on that journey of healing the pelvic floor. I've given birth 3 times vaginally. I'm not part of that 1 in 3 statistic, and I like to think it's because of all of the knowledge and work I've put into healing my pelvic floor after each delivery. And my youngest, he was 8 pounds 11 ounces, so it's not like he was tiny. And working on that stuff while you're pregnant as well can be really helpful. I did, and he was my biggest baby by far and my easiest delivery by far. Yeah, so just that quick little mention that is definitely helpful while you're pregnant as well. Doing those pelvic tilts also helps to get the baby in position. So why wouldn't you do it? Yeah, so look out for the poll that I'm going to post tomorrow. I was a little bit off my game last week because I was getting everything ready for my daughter going to school, but she's in it now. I feel like I understand the routine a little bit. So I shall be back on my game and there'll be more posting. So look out for the tutorial poll tomorrow. Let me know what you want me to teach you. And the video for that tutorial will be out on the weekend. And look out for the poll on Monday about what this Wednesday thing will be about next week, this little chat. And yeah, anything that's helpful. And you know, when I put those polls up, always feel welcome to add your own suggestions. So if I like put 2 options up and you're like, but I want to learn about this other thing, put that other thing up for sure. All right. Hope that was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. I shall see you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.